The fluorescent lights in the ER buzzed like a swarm of dying bees, casting a sterile glow over the chaos. I leaned against the nurse's station, sipping coffee that tasted like burnt regret, when the double doors slammed open. Two paramedics wheeled in a gurney, their faces taut, eyes flicking nervously to the girl strapped down. She was 13, maybe 14, her dark hair plastered to her forehead with sweat. Her wrists strained against the restraints, and her lips moved rapidly, spitting words I couldn't catch. The air around her felt wrong, heavy, like the prelude to a storm. "Dr. Eleanor Voss, Pediatric Neurology," I said, stepping forward. My badge swung on its lanyard, a small shield against the unknown. "What's the story?" "Clara Brennan," the lead paramedic said, his voice clipped. 13. Parents called 911 after she attacked her brother, screaming about demons in the walls. Hallucinations, aggression, possible psychosis. She was speaking. I don't know, Latin. Something weird. I raised an eyebrow. Latin, in a suburban kid from Maryland. I glanced at the girl. Her eyes were wide, pupils dilated, darting to the ceiling as if tracking something I couldn't see. "Demons," she whispered, her voice low and guttural. "They live in the lights." A chill ran down my spine, not from fear, but from skepticism. I'd seen too many cases labeled psychotic that turned out to be something else. Epilepsy, infections, even tumors. The human brain is a labyrinth, and psychiatry is often just a lazy map. "Get her to exam 3, I said. "I want a full workup. Bloods, EEG, CT. Now." As the gurney rolled past, Clara's head snapped toward me. Her gaze locked onto mine, unblinking, and she hissed, "Domine meus, non sum dignus." My Latin was rusty, but I recognized it. "Lord, I am not worthy." A prayer twisted into something sinister. I shook it off. This wasn't a horror movie. This was my hospital, my domain, and I wasn't about to let superstition cloud my judgment. The ER at St. Agnes Memorial was a microcosm of suburban despair. Cracked vinyl chairs, a vending machine that stole quarters, and families clutching rosaries or smartphones, praying for miracles in their own way. I'd been here 7 years, long enough to know the rhythm of a mid-sized East Coast hospital. We weren't Johns Hopkins, but we were scrappy, and I liked it that way. As a pediatric neurologist, I dealt with kids whose brains betrayed them. Seizures, migraines, the occasional rare syndrome that kept me up at night. I was good at it because I didn't trust easy answers. Compassion came second. Doubt was my first love. In exam 3, Clara's parents hovered like ghosts. Her mother, Mary Brennan, was a wiry woman in her 40s, her face pale under a Catholic schoolteacher's bun. Her father, Thomas, was broader, a contractor with calloused hands and a crucifix necklace glinting under his flannel shirt. They were devout, the kind of people who saw God in every sunset and Satan in every shadow. "She's not herself," Mary said, twisting a tissue into knots. "Clara's a good girl. Straight A's, sings in the choir. 2 weeks ago, she started changing. She'd stare at the walls, muttering. Last night, she screamed that the house was cursed. She hit her little brother with a lamp." Thomas nodded, his jaw tight. "We thought it was stress. Middle school's tough. But this morning, she was praying in tongues. Father Michael came over, said it might be spiritual." I bit back a sigh. Spiritual was a red flag, a shortcut to misdiagnosis. "Let's focus on the medical side," I said. "Has Clara had fevers, headaches, recent infections? Any family history of neurological or autoimmune conditions?" Mary hesitated, glancing at her husband. "My sister had lupus," she said quietly. "But Clara's healthy. This isn't physical. It's evil." I scribbled lupus in family on my notepad. Autoimmune diseases could run in families, and my gut was already whispering that this wasn't psychosis. But I needed data, not hunches. We'll run tests, I said. For now, she's safe here. Clara lay on the exam table, sedated with lorazepam to calm her thrashing. Her chart listed vitals. Heart rate elevated, temperature normal, no obvious trauma. The EEG tech was setting up, electrodes dangling like spider legs. I watched Clara's face, slack but twitching at the corners, as if fighting the drugs. Her fingers curled into claws, scratching faint lines on the sheet. I'd seen kids with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, even dissociative states. This felt different. Too abrupt, too visceral. Dr. Raj Patel, the on-call psychiatrist, swept in with his usual air of certainty. Raj was brilliant but loved his DSM-5 like a Bible. Classic psychosis, he said, scanning Clara's chart. Auditory hallucinations, religious delusions, aggression. Likely early-onset schizophrenia. We should start antipsychotics and consider inpatient. I crossed my arms. She's 13, Raj. Schizophrenia doesn't just appear overnight. Her EEG's clean so far, and her CT's pending. What about a neurological cause? Encephalitis, maybe. Raj snorted. You neurologists always think it's a brain bug. She's hearing demons and speaking Latin. That's not a virus. That's a breakdown. Or it's a symptom we're misreading, I snapped. I had a case 5 years ago. 10-year-old boy, hallucinations, violent outbursts. Everyone said psychosis. Turned out to be a temporal lobe tumor. We almost missed it. Raj rolled his eyes. And I've seen 100 kids like Clara end up in psych wards, not neurosurgery. Don't let your savior complex cloud the obvious. I wanted to argue, but the EEG tech called me over. Clara's brain waves were odd. Not epileptic, but there were subtle irregularities, like static in a radio signal. I filed it away. Doubt was my compass, and it was pointing away from psychiatry. Underscore 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 underscore. That night, I stayed late, calming Clara's chart in my office. The hospital was quieter after midnight, the hum of fluorescence my only company. Her blood work was normal. No infections, no drugs, no metabolic issues. The CT was clean, ruling out tumors or bleeds. But normal tests didn't mean a normal brain. I pulled up PubMed, searching for cases of sudden onset psychosis in kids. Most pointed to schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, but a few mentioned rarer causes, infections, metabolic disorders, and something called anti-NMDA receptor encephalitis. It was a long shot, a condition where the immune system attacks brain receptors, mimicking madness. But it nagged at me like a word on the tip of my tongue. At 3 a.m., a nurse paged me. Clara was awake. I found her in her room, sitting up, her eyes glassy but alert. The restraints were off. The sedation had worn thin. She was humming, a low, eerie melody that sounded like a hymn but wrong, warped. Her parents were asleep in the waiting room, their rosaries tangled in their hands. "Clara," I said softly, "can you hear me?" She turned, her gaze piercing. "The voices," she whispered, "they live in the lights. They know my sins." I glanced at the ceiling. The fluorescence flickered, a trick of old wiring. "What do they say?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. Her lips curled into a smile that wasn't hers. "They say the devil's coming. And he's wearing your face." My pulse quickened, but I forced a nod. "We're going to help you, Clara. I promise." As I left the room, her humming followed me, echoing down the hall. I didn't believe in demons, but I believed in fear, and Clara was drowning in it. I had to find the truth before it swallowed her whole. The hospital never slept, but at 4 a.m., it whispered. The corridors of Street Agnes Memorial were dim, the fluorescent lights flickering like a pulse struggling to hold. I sat in Clara Brennan's room, my laptop open to a half-read article on autoimmune encephalitis, the words blurring into the hum of the ventilator. Clara was sedated again, her body still after a night of thrashing. The restraints were back on, softer this time, but they left red marks on her wrists, like accusations. Her parents were gone, sent home by the night nurse to rest. Though I doubted they'd sleep, Mary's rosary still lay on the bedside table, its beads catching the light like tiny frozen tears. I couldn't shake Clara's words from last night. The devil's wearing your face. It wasn't fear that kept me here. It was doubt. Doubt that this was psychosis. Doubt that Raj's antipsychotics would fix her. Doubt that I could trust the clean CT and normal blood work. The EEG had shown those faint irregularities, like ripples in a pond hiding something beneath. I needed more data, but time was slipping away. A nurse, Jenny, poked her head in. "Dr. Voss, you've been here all night. Go home." "Not yet," I said, rubbing my eyes. "She have any episodes?" Jenny hesitated, her fingers tightening on the doorframe. "Not exactly," but she was humming again. That creepy hymn, and her heart rate spiked to 140 for no reason. Monitor caught it an hour ago. I glanced at Clara. Her chest rose and fell with the ventilator's rhythm, her face slack but not peaceful. "Autonomic dysfunction," I muttered. The brain-controlled heart rate, breathing, temperature. If something was attacking Clara's brain, it could explain the spikes. But what? A virus. A toxin. My mind circled back to anti-NMDA receptor encephalitis, but the tests for that took days, and we didn't have days. "Keep me posted," I said. Jenny nodded and left, her footsteps fading into the hospital's endless drone. By morning, Clara was worse. I was in the ICU, reviewing her chart, when the alarms went off. Her body arched off the bed, muscles rigid, eyes rolling back. A seizure. Nurses swarmed, pushing lorazepam through her IV as I barked orders for levetiracetam. The seizure stopped after 2 agonizing minutes, but Clara didn't wake. Her breathing was shallow, her pupils sluggish. I ordered a repeat EEG and a lumbar puncture, though I knew the parents would balk at the latter. Mary had already called the hospital twice, asking if we were torturing her daughter. Raj found me in the ICU lounge, where I was mainlining coffee and staring at Clara's latest labs. "Another seizure," he said, not a question. "This doesn't change my diagnosis. Psychosis can lower the seizure threshold. We see it in schizophrenia all the time. Or the seizures are the cause." I countered. "Her EEG's still off. Slow waves in the delta range. That's not schizophrenia, Raj. That's brain pathology." He sighed, adjusting his glasses. "You're chasing zebras, Eleanor. She's 13 with auditory hallucinations, religious delusions, and now seizures. The simplest explanation is psychiatric. Start risperidone. Transfer her to psych. They'll stabilize her at Pineview." Pineview, the state psychiatric hospital, a place where kids like Clara could disappear into a haze of meds and locked doors. I'd visited once, early in my career, and the memory still made my skin crawl. Teenagers shuffling in paper slippers, their eyes vacant, their futures written off. "She's not going to Pineview," I said. "Not until we rule out a neurological cause." Raj threw up his hands. "You're letting your guilt cloud your judgment. That boy 5 years ago wasn't your fault." My jaw tightened. He meant Lucas, a 10-year-old I'd failed. Hallucinations, aggression, labeled bipolar. I trusted the psych team, missed the signs of a temporal lobe tumor. By the time we found it, Lucas was gone. The memory was a scar, raw and jagged. "This isn't about Lucas," I lied. "It's about Clara. She deserves a chance." Raj walked away, muttering about hero complexes. I didn't care. Doubt was my fuel, and it was burning hot. underscore 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 underscore. Clara's condition spiraled. By day 3, she was catatonic. Her body was a statue, limbs stiff, eyes fixed on the ceiling. She didn't respond to pain, light, or her mother's voice. Mary sat by the bed, praying in whispers, her fingers tracing the rosary. Thomas stood in the corner, his broad shoulders hunched as if carrying the weight of his daughter's soul. The room smelled of antiseptic and fear, the walls scratched with faint marks I hadn't noticed before, lines and curves, like a child's attempt at writing. "Dr. Voss," Mary said, her voice trembling. "Father Michael says this isn't medical. He's seen it before, demonic oppression. He wants to perform a rite of deliverance." I swallowed my frustration. "Mrs. Brennan, Clara's seizures and catatonia are medical. We're running tests to find the cause. A priest can't fix this." Thomas stepped forward, his voice low. "You don't understand. Clara was fine until 2 weeks ago. Now she's possessed. Father Michael says the church has protocols for this." I wanted to scream that the church's protocols were medieval nonsense, but I saw the desperation in their eyes. They weren't my enemy. They were terrified. "Let's compromise," I said. "Father Michael can visit, pray with you. But Clara stays in the ICU, and we continue treatment. Deal?" Mary nodded reluctantly, but Thomas's eyes hardened. "You don't believe in anything, do you?" I didn't answer. Belief was a luxury I couldn't afford. Underscore 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 underscore. That afternoon, Father Michael arrived, a wiry man in his 60s with a black cassock and a leather-bound book. He sprinkled holy water on Clara's bed, chanting in Latin as the nurses exchanged uneasy glances. The media caught wind of it. Someone, probably a tech, had leaked the story. By evening, a local news van was parked outside, and the headline, "Possessed Teen in Maryland Hospital," was trending on X. The hospital's PR team was in a frenzy, and Dr. Helen Carver, the chief of medicine, summoned me to her office. "Eleanor, this is a circus," she said, her silver hair pulled tight. "The board wants Clara transferred to Pineview. We can't afford a lawsuit if she deteriorates." "She's not psychiatric," I said, my voice steady. "Her EEG's abnormal, her heart rate's unstable, and I'm waiting on CSF results. Transferring her now could kill her." Helen leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "You have 48 hours to prove it's neurological. After that, she's out." I left her office, my hands shaking. The hospital was a machine, and Clara was a cog that didn't fit. I needed answers, fast. Underscore 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 underscore. That night, I reviewed the EEG again. The slow waves were more pronounced, and there were brief spikes during Clara's heart rate surges. Autonomic dysfunction, seizures, catatonia. It was a constellation, not a coincidence. I pulled up the article on anti-NMDA receptor encephalitis again. The symptoms fit: sudden psychosis, seizures, autonomic instability, catatonia. It was rare, often misdiagnosed as schizophrenia. The key was the CSF, Cerebrospinal fluid could show antibodies attacking the brain's NMDA receptors. I'd ordered the lumbar puncture, but Mary had refused, calling it invasive. I needed to convince her. At 2 a.m., I was paged to Clara's room. Jenny was there, her face pale. "Dr. Voss, you need to see this." Clara was still catatonic, but the scratches on the wall had grown. They weren't random anymore. They formed words, jagged and uneven. MEAQLPA. My fault. I stared, my pulse racing. "Did you see her do this?" I asked. Jenny shook her head. "She hasn't moved. But I swear I saw her hand twitch an hour ago, when the monitors went haywire." I touched the scratches, the plaster cool under my fingers. The words were real, carved with something sharp. Maybe a nail, maybe a ring. Clara's hands were empty, her nails short. My mind spun. Was she moving in her catatonic state? Or was this something else? I didn't believe in demons, but I believed in the brain's ability to deceive. "Get security to watch this room," I said. "And don't let the parents see this." "Not yet." Jenny nodded, but her eyes were wide, like she'd seen a ghost. I didn't blame her. Clara's body was a battlefield, but we were fighting the wrong war. The IQ was a cathedral of machines, its beeps and hums a mechanical hymn. Clara Brennan lay at its center, a fragile relic in a sterile shrine. Her body was still catatonic, her eyes fixed on some unseen horizon, but the scratches on the wall. MEAQLPA burned in my mind like a warning. I stood by her bed, my clipboard heavy with notes that led nowhere. The CSF results were still pending, delayed by the lab's backlog, and time was a luxury Clara didn't have. Her heart rate spiked again last night, 150 beats per minute, her body fighting a war we couldn't see. I was certain now, this wasn't psychosis. It was her brain, under siege. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, casting slats of light across Clara's face. Her mother, Mary, sat vigil, her lips moving in silent prayer. Thomas was outside, pacing the hall with Father Michael, their voices low but urgent. The media circus had grown. Reporters camped in the hospital parking lot, their cameras hungry for a glimpse of the possessed girl. The board's 48-hour ultimatum hung over me like a guillotine. Prove it's neurological, or Clara would be shipped to Penview, lost to a system that would medicate her symptoms and ignore their cause. I flipped through Clara's chart, my eyes catching on a detail I'd glossed over. Mary's lupus. She'd mentioned it in passing. But I needed more. Autoimmune diseases could run in families, and my gut was screaming that Clara's symptoms, hallucinations, seizures, catatonia, weren't random. I'd read a 2013 paper in the Lancet Neurology about anti-NMDA receptor encephalitis, a rare condition where the immune system attacks the brain's NMDA receptors, mimicking schizophrenia or demonic possession. The symptoms fit Clara like a glove, but I needed the cerebrospinal fluid analysis to confirm it, and I needed Mary to agree to the lumbar puncture she'd refused. I approached her cautiously, my voice soft. "Mrs. Brennan, can we talk about your lupus? It might help us understand Clara." Mary's fingers paused on her rosary, her eyes wary. "What does my illness have to do with her?" "Lupus is autoimmune," I said. "Your immune system attacks your own body. Sometimes autoimmune conditions run in families, and they can affect the brain. I think Clara's symptoms might be tied to something like that." She frowned, clutching the rosary tighter. "Clara's not sick like me. She's under attack. Father Michael says it's spiritual warfare." I bit back my frustration. "I respect your beliefs, but we need to explore every possibility. The lumbar puncture I mentioned, it's a test to check Clara's spinal fluid. It could show us what's attacking her brain." Mary's face hardened. "You want to stick a needle in her spine. She's already suffering. Father Michael says tests like that weaken her soul." I took a deep breath, my hands clenching the clipboard. "Mrs. Brennan, Clara's seizures are getting worse. She's not eating, barely breathing on her own. If we don't find the cause, she could die. The test isn't dangerous. I'll be there the whole time. She looked at Clara, her eyes filling with tears. I'll pray on it, she whispered. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. I nodded and left the room, my heart pounding. Doubt was my compass, but faith was Mary's, and I had to navigate both. Underscore 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 underscore. In the doctor's lounge, I pulled up the 2013 paper again. The screen glowed in the dim light, the words a lifeline. Anti-NMDA receptor encephalitis was a chameleon, often misdiagnosed as psychosis. It started with flu-like symptoms. Clara had a fever 2 weeks ago, per her chart, then escalated to hallucinations, aggression, seizures, and catatonia. The immune system mistook NMDA receptors, critical for memory and thought, for enemies, like friendly fire in a war. The paper cited a case, a 15-year-old girl labeled schizophrenic who recovered after immunotherapy. But the key was early diagnosis. Clara was running out of time. Dr. Raj Patel swept in, his white coat crisp despite the hour. "Still chasing your zebra?" he asked, pouring coffee. "I heard about the wall scratches. Sounds like Clara's putting on a show, even in catatonia." I glared at him. She's not faking. Her EEG shows delta waves, her heart rate's unstable, and her seizures are escalating. This is neurological, Raj, not a performance. He shrugged. Or it's psychogenic. Conversion disorder, maybe, triggered by stress. The Latin, the religious stuff, it's her Catholic upbringing, amplified by a breakdown. I'm writing the order for Pinegu tomorrow. My blood boiled. Over my dead body. Her CSF results are coming, and I'm betting they'll show anti-NMDA antibodies. You transfer her now. You're condemning her. Raj raised an eyebrow. You're risking your career for a hunch. Helen's already on the warpath. You sure about this? I wasn't sure, not completely. But Lucas's face flashed in my mind. His small body on the autopsy table. The tumor we'd missed. I couldn't fail Clara too. I'm sure, I said. Clara's condition worsened that afternoon. A grand mal seizure hit during rounds, her body convulsing so violently the bed shook. We pushed diazepam, then phenytoin, but the monitor screamed. Her oxygen dropped, her heart rate erratic. The ICU team intubated her, the tube snaking down her throat as Mary sobbed in the corner. Thomas stormed out, muttering about doctors playing God. I stayed, my hand steady, but my mind racing. The seizures were relentless, a sign the brain's inflammation was spreading. I needed that CSF test. Now, I found Mary in the chapel, a small room with stained glass and flickering candles. She knelt before a statue of the Virgin Mary, her rosary clicking. "Mrs. Brennan," I said, kneeling beside her. "Clara's worse. The seizures could cause permanent damage. The lumbar puncture is our best shot at finding out why." She didn't look at me. "Father Michael says the devil's fighting harder because we're praying. He wants to do the right tonight." I swallowed my anger. A right won't stop her seizures, but the test might. "Your lupus. Did you have flares when you were pregnant with Clara?" Mary's head snapped up, surprised. "How did you?" "Yes, it was bad. I was bedridden for months." "Why?" "Autoimmune diseases can affect kids, even years later," I said. "Clara's brain might be under attack, not by a demon, but by her own immune system. The test can tell us. Please, let me help her." Tears streamed down her face. I don't know what to believe anymore. I touched her arm, my voice soft. "Believe in Clara. She's fighting. Help her fight back." She nodded, barely, and whispered, Do it. The lumbar puncture was quick but tense. I performed it myself, guiding the needle into Clara's spine as the nurse held her still. The fluid was clear, no signs of infection, but I sent it to the lab with a rush order for anti-NMDA antibody testing. The results would take 24 hours, maybe less. I felt a flicker of hope, but it was fragile, like a candle in a storm. That night, Father Michael performed his rite. The ICU room was crowded. Mary, Thomas, 2 nurses, and me, watching from the doorway. He sprinkled holy water, his voice rising in Latin. Exorcizo te, omnis spiritus imund. Clara's monitors stayed steady, no spikes, no seizures. The nurses crossed themselves, but I saw only a girl lost in her own brain, untouched by prayers. The media ate it up. A reporter slipped past security, snapping photos before being escorted out. By morning, the story was everywhere. Exorcism in Maryland ICU. Dr. Helen Carver called me to her office again. "This is a PR nightmare," she said, her voice ice. "The board's done. Clara's out tomorrow, neurological or not. The CSF results are coming," I said. "If it's anti-NMDA encephalitis, we can treat her. Transferring her now is malpractice." Helen's eyes narrowed. "You're on thin ice, Eleanor. One more stunt, and you're suspended." I left, my chest tight. The hospital was a machine, and I was a wrench in its gears. But Clara wasn't a statistic. She was a kid, and I was her last chance. Underscore 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 underscore. At 3 a.m., the lab paged me. I ran to my office, my heart pounding as I opened the email. The CSF results were in. Elevated anti-NMDA receptor antibodies. Clara had autoimmune encephalitis, her immune system attacking her brain, turning her thoughts into chaos. I wanted to shout, to cry, but there was no time. I needed to start treatment, steroids, IVIG, maybe plasmapheresis. But as I headed to the ICU, I saw Mary and Thomas in the hall, their faces grim. Father Michael was with them, his hand on Mary's shoulder. "Dr. Voss," Mary said, her voice shaking. "We've decided. No more tests, no more drugs. Father Michael says the rite is working. We want Clara moved to a spiritual care facility." My stomach dropped. The diagnosis was in my hands, but the war wasn't over. The brain doesn't lie, but it can hide the truth in plain sight. The ICU smelled of antiseptic and despair, a sharp tang that clung to my skin. Clara Brennan lay intubated, her chest rising and falling with the ventilator's mechanical sigh. The CSF results burned in my mind. Anti-NMDA receptor encephalitis, a rare autoimmune assault on her brain. Her immune system was attacking her NMDA receptors, proteins critical for thought, memory, and sanity, mistaking them for invaders. It explained the hallucinations, the seizures, the catatonia, the Latin prayers twisted into something sinister. But knowing the enemy didn't mean winning the war. Mary and Thomas Brennan stood in the hall, their faces set, ready to pull Clara from treatment for a spiritual care facility. My diagnosis was a lifeline, but they were cutting it. I clutched the lab printout, my hands trembling with urgency. We needed to start high-dose steroids and intravenous immunoglobulin, IVIG, immediately to suppress Clara's immune system and stop the attack. But the parents' refusal, fueled by Father Michael's exorcism and a viral media storm, was a wall I couldn't climb. The hospital was no ally. Dr. Helen Carver's ultimatum echoed in my head. One more misstep, and I'd be suspended. The media frenzy had turned St. Agnes Memorial into a circus, with headlines screaming exorcism versus medicine, and ex-posts calling Clara the possessed girl. I was running out of time, and Clara was running out of life. I found Mary and Thomas in the ICU waiting room, a cramped space with faded magazines and a flickering TV. Father Michael was there, his cassock a dark shadow against the pastel walls. Mary's eyes were red, her rosary knotted in her hands. Thomas stood by the window, his broad frame tense, staring at the parking lot where reporters swarmed like vultures. "Mr. and Mrs. Brennan," I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my chest. "We have a diagnosis. Clara has anti-NMDA receptor encephalitis. It's an autoimmune disease. Her body's attacking her brain, causing the symptoms. We can treat it with steroids and IVIG. It's not a cure, but it's a chance." Mary's head snapped up, confusion in her eyes. "Autoimmune? Like my lupus?" "Exactly," I said. "Your lupus means your immune system attacks your joints, your skin. In Clara, it's attacking her brain's NMDA receptors, which control how neurons talk to each other. It's like friendly fire. Her body's fighting itself, causing the hallucinations, seizures, everything. Steroids can calm the attack, and IVIG can reset her immune system. But we need to start now." Thomas turned, his jaw tight. "You said the spinal test would tell us. Now you want more drugs. Father Michael says the right is working. Her seizures stopped during his prayers." I swallowed my frustration. The seizures stopped because we adjusted her meds, not because of prayers. This disease is rare, but it's real. Without treatment, Clara could stay catatonic or worse. The longer we wait, the more damage her brain takes. Father Michael stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Dr. Voss, you see the body, but not the soul. Clara's symptoms began after she stopped attending Mass. The devil exploits weakness. The right is her salvation." My hands clenched the printout, the paper crinkling. "Father, with respect, the devil doesn't cause antibodies in spinal fluid. This is science, not superstition. Clara's brain is inflamed, and we can reduce that inflammation. But I need your help to convince them." Mary's voice broke. "What if you're wrong? What if the drugs hurt her more? I read online, steroids have side effects, and the media says you're experimenting on her." The media. Of course. Some tabloid had dug up my name, painting me as a cold scientist torturing a devout family. I took a deep breath, forcing calm. "Steroids can have side effects. Weight gain, mood changes, infections. IVIG can cause headaches, allergic reactions. But untreated encephalitis can leave Clara in a coma or with permanent brain damage. The risks of doing nothing are worse." Thomas shook his head. "We're taking her to St. Joseph's Center. They do spiritual healing. No needles, no drugs." I wanted to scream, but I saw the fear in their eyes, not just for Clara, but for their faith. They weren't the enemy. They were drowning. I lowered my voice, stepping closer. "I lost a patient once. A boy, Lucas, 10 years old. He had hallucinations like Clara. We thought it was psychiatric, gave him antipsychotics. But it was a brain tumor. By the time we found it, he was gone. I see Lucas in Clara, and I can't let her slip away. Please, give me a chance to save her." Mary's eyes softened, tears spilling. You lost someone." I nodded, my throat tight. "I did, and I carry it every day. Let me carry Clara's fight. I'll be with her every step." Thomas looked at Mary, then at Father Michael, who frowned but said nothing. Mary whispered, "1 week. We'll try your treatment for 1 week. But if she doesn't get better, we're done." It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. "Thank you," I said. "I'll start the orders now. Underscore 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 underscore. The treatment began that afternoon. I ordered methylprednisolone, a high-dose steroid, and IVIG, a blood product to modulate the immune system. The nurses hung the IV bags, the clear fluid dripping into Clara's vein like a lifeline. I explained the process to the parents. The steroids would reduce inflammation, calming the immune attack, while IVIG would help reset the system, like rebooting a glitching computer. But the disease was unpredictable. Some patients recovered quickly, others lingered, their brains scarred. Clara's catatonia and seizures meant her brain was already battered. I didn't know how much of her we could save. Dr. Raj Patel caught me in the hall, his arms crossed. "You got your way," he said, "but you're playing with fire. If she crashes, it's on you." "She's not crashing," I snapped. "The diagnosis is solid. You'd know if you read the literature." Raj smirked. "I read it. Anti-MDA's a long shot, and the parents are one bad headline away from suing. Good luck." I ignored him, but his words stung. The hospital was a political minefield, and Dr. Helen Carver was watching. She'd called me again, warning that the board was concerned about liability. The media had escalated. National outlets picked up the story, and a viral ex-post claimed I was defying God's will. Protesters gathered outside, some with signs reading, "Save Clara's soul." The hospital's PR team was in overdrive, and I was the scapegoat. That night, I stayed in the ICU, monitoring Clara's vitals. The steroids were risky. High doses could cause infections, high blood pressure, even psychosis, ironic given her symptoms. IVIG was safer but slow, taking days to show effect. Her EEG was still abnormal, delta waves like a storm in her brain. But there was a flicker of hope. Her heart rate was stabilizing, no spikes since the treatment started. I clung to it, a raft in the chaos. At 2 a.m., a nurse paged me. Clara's temperature was spiking -100 and 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit. I ran to her room, my heart sinking. Fever could mean infection, a side effect of the steroids suppressing her immune system. Her blood work showed elevated white cells, and I ordered broad-spectrum antibiotics, praying it wasn't sepsis. Mary was there, her face pale. "Is this normal?" she asked. "It's a complication," I admitted. "The steroids weaken her immune system, so infections can creep in. We're treating it, but we need to watch her closely." Mary's voice trembled. "You said this would help her." "It will," I said, hoping I sounded convincing. "But it's a fight. Clara's strong. She's still in there." Mary nodded, but her eyes were distant, fixed on the rosary. I left the room, my chest tight. Faith can move mountains, but it can't cure a misfiring brain. Underscore 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 underscore. By day 3 of treatment, Clara showed flickers of change. Her catatonia eased. Her limbs were less rigid, her eyes tracking light. But she was still intubated, her brain too inflamed to breathe on her own. The infection was under control, but the fever had delayed the IVIG, slowing progress. The media frenzy grew. TV preacher called Clara's case a battle for America's soul, and the hospital switchboard was flooded with calls. Helen summoned me again, her office cold despite the summer heat. "You're out of time," she said. "The board wants Clara transferred. The liability's too high, and the optics are catastrophic." "She's improving," I said. "Her EEG's better, her fever's down. We're on the right track." Helen leaned forward, her eyes like steel. "You've got one more day. If she's not awake, she's gone. And you're on probation." I left, my hands shaking. Probation meant paperwork, oversight, maybe losing my privileges. But Clara was waking up. I could feel it. I just needed time. That night, I was in my office when Jenny, the nurse, called. "Dr. Voss, come quick. Clara's talking." I ran to the ICU, my heart pounding. Clara was still intubated, but her eyes were open, darting wildly. The tube prevented clear speech, but she was mouthing words, her voice a garbled whisper. I leaned close, straining to hear. "Lights, voices, gone," she rasped, then fell silent, her eyes closing. Mary gasped, clutching Thomas's arm. "She's back. She's talking." I forced a smile, but my stomach twisted. The words were incoherent, fragmented like pieces of a shattered mirror. The treatment was working, but Clara's brain had been under attack for weeks. The girl we knew might still be lost, her thoughts scrambled by the inflammation scars. I ordered a repeat EEG and more IVIG, but as I left the room, Mary's rosary clicked behind me, a reminder that the battle wasn't over. The IQ was a world of shadows, its machines humming a quiet requiem. Clara Brennan's room was softer now. The harsh fluorescence dimmed, replaced by the warm flicker of candles Mary had brought from home. They lined the windowsill, their flames dancing in the draft, casting golden light across Clara's face. She was extubated, her chest rising on its own for the first time in weeks, but her eyes were distant, like windows to a house half abandoned. The steroids and IVIG had pulled her back from the edge. But the girl who emerged wasn't the Clara her parents remembered. Not yet, maybe not ever. I stood by her bed, my hands in my pockets, feeling the weight of victory and loss intertwined. It had been 10 days since the diagnosis: anti-NMDA receptor encephalitis, a rare autoimmune assault on Clara's brain. Her immune system had turned traitor, attacking NMDA receptors, tiny gates in her neurons that governed thought, memory, and identity, causing the hallucinations, seizures, and catatonia that had masqueraded as possession. The high-dose steroids had calmed the inflammation, and the IVIG had begun to reset her immune system, like a computer rebooting after a crash. But the brain is not a machine. It's a tapestry, and Clara's was frayed, its threads stretched by weeks of silent war. Mary sat beside her, her rosary clicking softly, her lips moving in prayer. Thomas stood at the foot of the bed, his broad hands gripping the rail, his face a map of grief and hope. The media frenzy had faded. Reporters chased new scandals, and the protesters outside had dwindled to a few diehards with wilted signs. But the hospital was still reeling. Dr. Helen Carver had launched an internal review, citing delays in diagnosis and public relations failures. My probation was official, a scarlet letter on my record. But I didn't care. Clara was awake, and that was enough. For now. "Dr. Voss," Mary said, her voice soft but steady. She recognized me this morning. She said, "Mama," just once, but it was her. I smiled, though my heart ached. That's a good sign. Her brain's starting to reconnect. It's slow, but it's progress. Thomas looked at me, his eyes searching. Will she be herself again? The Clara who sang in the choir, who loved math. I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. The treatment's working, but the inflammation did damage. She may have memory gaps, trouble with coordination, maybe emotional challenges. We won't know the full extent for months. Physical therapy, cognitive rehab, they'll help. But she's here, and that's a miracle in itself. Mary's fingers paused on the rosary. "A miracle," she whispered, her eyes on the candles. "Father Michael says God answered our prayers." I nodded, though my miracle was measured in antibody levels and EEG waves. Faith had carried them through the darkness, and I couldn't begrudge that. Science had saved Clara, but hope had saved her parents. underscore 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 underscore. The past week had been a blur of small victories and quiet fears. Clara's EEG showed fewer delta waves, her brain's storm calming. She could track objects with her eyes, squeeze Mary's hand on command. But her speech was halting, words tumbling out in fragments. Lights, home, sorry, like pieces of a shattered puzzle. Her left arm trembled, a motor deficit from the inflammation scars. I'd seen cases like this in the literature. Some patients recovered fully. Others lived with deficits, their brains rewired but never restored. Clara was young, her brain plastic, but time would tell how much she could reclaim. The hospital was a battleground, even now. Raj Patel had backed off, grudgingly admitting the diagnosis was plausible, but he still pushed for a psych consult, citing Clara's emotional ability. I ignored him, focusing on her neurological care. Helen's review loomed, and rumors swirled that the board wanted a scapegoat. Me for defying their transfer order, or the ER team for missing the diagnosis early. I'd spent hours in meetings, defending my decisions, my voice steady despite the exhaustion. The truth was simple. Clara's case was rare, a zebra in a field of horses, and we'd nearly lost her to dogma. The media had left scars too. A national outlet ran a piece titled, "The Exorcism That Wasn't," painting Clara's case as a cautionary tale of superstition versus science. It was accurate but cold, reducing her to a headline. Ex-posts still circulated, some praising my heroism, others calling me a godless doctor who tortured a devout family. I avoided them, but the hospital's PR team didn't. They'd issued a statement, vague and corporate, promising improved protocols. I doubted it would change anything. Medicine was a human endeavor, and humans were fallible. Underscore 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 underscore. That afternoon, I sat with Clara during her physical therapy. The therapist, a cheerful woman named Lisa, guided Clara's arm through exercises, coaxing her to grasp a foam ball. Clara's movements were jerky, her brow furrowed with effort, but she didn't give up. I watched, my chest tight. This was the real fight. Not the diagnosis, not the treatment, but the slow, grueling work of rebuilding a life. "Good job, Clara," Lisa said, her voice bright. "You're a champ." Clara's lips twitched, almost a smile. She looked at me, her eyes clearer than they'd been in weeks. "Thank you," she whispered, the words slurred but deliberate. I blinked back tears, nodding. "You're welcome, kiddo." Later, I met Mary and Thomas in the family lounge to discuss next steps. Clara would need weeks of inpatient rehab, then outpatient care, speech therapy, occupational therapy, maybe neuropsychology. The steroids would taper slowly to avoid relapse, and we'd monitor her antibody levels. I explained it all, my voice calm but firm, emphasizing the need for vigilance. Anti-MDA encephalitis could recur, and misdiagnosis remained a risk. Too many girls like Clara were labeled crazy or possessed when their brains were under attack. "Your lupus was a clue," I told Mary. "Autoimmune diseases can hide in families, striking in different ways. If Clara has kids someday, they'll need to know her history." Mary nodded, her eyes on the rosary. "I thought it was the devil. I was so scared." "You did what you thought was right," I said. "You fought for her, just like I did." Thomas cleared his throat, his voice rough. "We owe you, Dr. Voss." "We? We almost lost her. I shook my head. You didn't lose her. She's here because you didn't give up. Underscore 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 underscore. That night, I visited Clara's room one last time before my shift ended. The candles were still lit, their glow bathing the room in warmth. Mary was praying, her voice a soft murmur, the rosary draped over Clara's hand. The IV dripped silently, its bag nearly empty, a quiet testament to the science that had brought her back. Clara was asleep, her face peaceful, but her left hand twitched, reaching for the rosary's beads. The gesture was small, instinctive, but it felt like a bridge between the girl she'd been and the girl she was becoming. I stepped back, my throat tight. I'd spent weeks fighting for Clara, driven by doubt and a ghost named Lucas. I didn't believe in demons, but I believed in the brain's fragility, its capacity to deceive and endure. Clara's recovery was incomplete, her future uncertain, but she was here, breathing, fighting. That was enough. As I left, Mary's prayers followed me, a soft cadence against the hospital's hum. I thought of the parents out there, watching their children change. Voices whispering, eyes turning strange. I wanted to tell them, don't wait. Don't assume it's madness or evil. The brain can lie, but it can also heal if you catch it in time. We saved Clara's life, but the girl we knew may still be lost in the shadows. If someone you love starts acting strange, don't just call a priest. Call the neurologist.